If you run ads and you just suffered through the 2024 political season like we did, you probably hit the pause button for a few months. Now that the election is finally behind us, is it time to double down on commercials and advertisements, or should we just sit back and wait for the new year? With many businesses already firmly set in 2025, what kind of arbitrage opportunity is here for the rest of us? Marketing and sales and politics are full of myths, misconceptions, and sometimes flat-out lies. Join us as we get out of the echo chamber and look for the best way to advertise before, during, and especially after the political season.
Hello and welcome to the Rethink Marketing Podcast, where we strive to balance all sides of today's marketing issues. I'm Paul Frodge, joined by Mr. Marketing, and for today's conversation, the propeller of platforms of political persuasion, Colin Jeffries. Colin, how are you doing today?
Oh, Paul, I'm feeling great. Finally after the election. So I'm feeling pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing really good. There's a lot to talk about after the election because, obviously leading up to the election, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it, personally, professionally. And, now that it's over, there's still some of that lingering with people. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for us as marketers to really move forward and try to figure out the year end and moving into 2025.
Yes, absolutely. I've had a lot of conversations, I'm sure you have as well, with marketing leaders who really hit the pause button on traditional media and digital media in a lot of regards, especially related to outbound. So I think as business owners, marketers, et cetera, a lot of us, when political season's upon us, we sort of rely solely on inbound. We're not doing a lot of mailers or radio spots or TV spots or, pre-roll or retargeting or anything of that nature because all that national media is being eaten up by the political spend. So now we're in kind of an interesting spot where I think traditionally going into political season, the right move for a marketer was often to hit the pause button, especially during a big presidential election, right? Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. I think I read that Kamala's campaign spent $1 billion on advertising and everything, which is incredible when you think about the difference between what that's doing to TV rates and radio rates and social media and the whole shebang, right? That money is a substantial quantity of money, and that's being sent to every digital marketing channel and traditional marketing channel that we typically would be using, including direct mail, TV, radio, and then, of course, all across the digital spectrum. So, yeah, how should marketers stand out in that sort of onslaught?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of the rate issue in the political season where politicians get the lowest unit rate. PAC money gets, they can charge whatever they want at the media companies for PAC money and get whatever rates they want. So the combination thereof and the amount of money being spent across the country in political all lends itself to people just not wanting to be in that space during that time. There's opportunities also where they just don't want to deal with all the preempts on the traditional side of things with radio and TV. And then really just trying to figure out whether or not you want to stand out during that time. I could go both ways on the viewpoint. I understand people's frustration during that time of the year, but also I think it's also an opportunity to really stand out because it's political ad. A lot of competition has ceased advertising in those platforms during that period of time. So when your ad is shown, there is the opportunity to really stand out from the competition because the advertisers are jumping out and pausing advertising during that time. So let's get into a little bit more about after the election, since we are after the election, and what advertisers should do here at year end.
Absolutely, Paul. It seems like a lot of advertisers, a lot of marketers and agencies as well, they stop spending in, say, September, October, knowing that PAC money, again, national campaign money, local election money, et cetera, is flowing into their media channels. They sort of hit the pause button, and then they really don't start spending again until January because most organizations are planning year-end, holiday, et cetera, in, say, March, April, May, June. That way they can get the inventory, they can hire the people, they can do all the stuff that they need to do logistically to deliver against year end. So there could be a really good arbitrage opportunity, again, depending on the industry, depending on the competitor set, depending on the maturity of the vertical and those sorts of things. But I'm noticing in a lot of verticals, media spend is down, a lot of reliance on inbound through the end of the year, except for on very, very specific channels. So you think about marketing on like the Amazon marketplace or PPC for Google ads, et cetera. Those seem a little bit saturated still too, because again, those are very, very low funnel. So for those of us who can walk somebody through a shorter buying cycle, now could be a really great time to dive in on those traditional channels, direct mail, radio, TV, and also the digital channels too, social, pre-roll, et cetera. What are you noticing, Paul, from an agency perspective?
It's a mix for sure. There's an opportunity where many of our advertisers stuck with it through the political season, but also gave us the opportunity to rethink the way we're going to market for the advertising spend. And those that were adamantly against spending during that time, it was an opportunity to reallocate the budget into new areas that they haven't explored before. And we've had some major success with that from an ROI perspective.
That's really interesting. When you're thinking about ROI, or I'll just say performance in general during political season, you mentioned earlier, typically rates are more expensive because the stations or the networks or what have you, they don't want to give advantageous pricing to a one-off business that's buying a couple $1,000s a month and spend, and then have to match that for political campaigns. So typically rates are going up. A lot of the actual sales of those rates for Senate campaigns and, of course, for presidential campaigns are being handled at the national level and not at the local level. So, Paul, when you're talking to business owners, marketers, et cetera, how are you adjusting their expectations for key performance indicators or success metrics?
Yeah, the way that we're talking to our clients about this is the opportunity to look at seasonality. A lot of times we'll go back 4 years ago. A lot of times we'll go back 2 years ago, depending on hot political times, and see how their business, maybe they're doing a lot better now than they were 2 or 4 years ago, but the percentage increases and things like that, in October and November and compared to November, December, and moving into next year. So it's an opportunity to really look at the data and analytics and really drill down on setting expectations. But as I mentioned before, the opportunity to reallocate into certain areas has been a way to look at, hey, what are we going to do 2 and 4 years from now, and what worked and what didn't.
I really like that idea of planning out a couple of years in advance, or maybe 4 years in advance, right? Every sort of like the old joke, oh, wow, it's December, Christmas is coming again. Like, yeah, it happens then every year, right? When we think about political season, yes, we have, primaries in the spring. We have the major election, the main election in November. Obviously presidential races happen every 4 years, right? Like we can see predictably when these are going to occur. So planning far in advance makes a ton of sense. I would say, unfortunately, a lot of marketers I'm talking to, they're like, oh my gosh, it's June of 2024. We've after the primary, we have this presidential election coming up. There are a lot of contested Senate races, et cetera. There's going to be a ton of money flowing into these media channels. What should we do? Well, Paul, I appreciate the fact that you're sitting down with clients now and saying, hey, in 4 years, what do we want to do to handle this? This also gives us an opportunity to figure out, hey, we had an election in November, and then starting, let's say, mid-November or around Thanksgiving, Black Friday, whatever, we really doubled down on media spend. What did that do? Did it work well enough that in 4 years we want to replicate that, or in 2 years? Or do we want to take that and make some adjustments, and then we can actually plan far ahead, say 12 months ahead, 18 months ahead, et cetera, next time?
A lot of times we're having these types of conversations, especially when it's the presidential election year in fourth quarter of the year before. So we try to get out ahead of it. But as you mentioned, many clients, their hair is on fire after the primaries and not knowing what to do. So we try to get out ahead of it as much as possible. And obviously, we can't predict how contentious a certain race is going to be, a year in advance. You can get some indicators on that, but it just seems like the opportunity to get out ahead of it in the planning from the year before. And we had much success with that last year.
Absolutely. I will say, taking a little bit of a different perspective, for businesses that are reliant on earned media, I know, like in my work specifically, we do a lot with earned media, and it can be really difficult to get any sort of earned media, even at a local level, during political season. So my recommendation for that is now we probably do want to wait until 2025 if we're in a position where earned media is really core to our marketing mix. If it's not, to your point, Paul, I think we can adjust our marketing spend, try some new channels, do some non-traditional things, and then if appropriate, again, given the competitor set, the industry, the maturity, et cetera, then we can double down between the election ending and end of year. But that's something to consider as well, because earned media, I know, is important to a lot of businesses, and it's really tough to get during political season.
Yeah, and also it might be an opportunity for PR teams to look outside of the non-news outlets during this time as well to pitch stories and look at podcasts, look at the opportunities maybe with some local magazines in those markets, look at opportunities with newspapers in those markets that are mainly on the digital side. So could be an opportunity to get a story that you wouldn't have otherwise thought about because your focus hasn't traditionally been in those mediums.
That's a great point, Paul. I mean, business podcasts still want to interview business people. Maybe some people that are political consultants or have some perspective on the political side. But I think about a weekly podcast. I think between early September and end of November, they still have, call it 10, 12 episodes to fill. And so maybe you can pitch yourself as a guest, or as a marketer, you can pitch the CEO or the head of whatever. You can pitch them in and actually land those traditional spots. And then that can be some evergreen media that you can use later on as well. Again, podcasts, YouTube channels. I think about live streams and those sorts of things. It's too bad Clubhouse has really taken a backseat and declined, because that would be a great opportunity too if it was still relevant.
Well, also, Colin, when you're talking about those outlets that might be the non-traditional ways of approaching, especially on the PR side, it's an opportunity also to build content, the content creation that can come from those, and really building up your brand by being that subject matter expert in areas where it might be very difficult to get news stories all the time, but you might land 4 or 5 non-traditional. I say non-traditional, meaning that you haven't really explored it before. Those opportunities to really build up your asset base moving into the new year.
That's a great point, Paul. Absolutely. Yeah, I think about the amount of time that it can take to do content planning and content strategy, much less execution. Maybe when we're not buying spots and managing ad spend, that's a great time to step back and do a lot of content creation.
So, Colin, we talked a lot about before, during, and political for advertising and ways to explore the ad spend during this period of time. So maybe it's an opportunity to rethink as we explore future and maybe get out of the day-to-day and the leading up to the election 2 years, 4 years from now, and for marketing teams to really have that conversation with either their internal marketing teams, their CEO, if you're an agency, with your client, and really be thinking proactively about future opportunities and driving business.
Well said. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rethink Marketing Podcast. Until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions and keep rethinking the strategy between political season and year end. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If people want to connect with us, where should they go, Paul?
RethinkMarketingPodcast.com, Colin. What can listeners do to help us in return for the sage marketing wisdom and our pithy humor?
They can help us by leaving a review on their favorite platform or sharing this episode with a fellow marketer to help them cut through the clutter.
Well, until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions.